right, boys. Episode 41 of the Racing Line podcast.
Welcome.
A new guest to chew the fat with this weekend. Welcome, Tristan. Welcome back to the pod.
Oh, cheers. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you in a little bit more of an informal environment tonight. You get your opinions on the week in racing and what a weekend in racing we had, boys. Silverstone was, like we've been talking about, the lackluster racing that's taken place in Formula One for the last month or so. But well, what a week of racing. Where to begin? That's the real question.
PK.
Straight there. Oh no. Oh, no comment.
I didn't even think about that. I totally forgot about that.
I know you've got a lot to say about the booing.
No, I don't want to start there. Probably don't even want to mention that today, but I just thought when Anthony said where to begin, I thought I'd quickly jump in there. I thought about that in the shower.
Mate, you turned that into a snippet for like TikTok or Instagram, and I think you'll get like so many views.
Yeah.
Where actually to begin, boys? Where do you reckon?
I don't know.
When he started Silverstone, mate. What a
so.
Race.
I reckon it's got to be race of the year. I mean, there's been a couple of good ones, but definitely took the cake so far.
Well, let's begin on the first corner then.
Oh,
Firstly,
we didn't even get to the corner. What are you talking about?
Well, let's get into onto the main straight. Russell, poor start. Actually, before we go there, if you haven't watched the race, stop, go watch the race, come back, please.
No spoilers.
Yeah, it's a race that we're going to spoil it
you
now.
Didn't mention our sponsors.
Our unofficial sponsors of Foxtel and KO.
Yeah,
the Foxtel and KO Mini. We're still trying to get some financial monetization from these call outs, but regardless, go watch the race. It's definitely worth the watch, and then come back and listen to the pod. But George Russell, slow off the line, went for the alternate strategy with the hard tyre to begin with. Definitely seemed like the wrong choice, and then kind of was just in the middle of nowhere. And history will tell the tale of what happened next. I mean, the halo. We spoke about it on the pod last year. I mean, it was a topic of controversy when it came in. I mean, all of us were pretty negative about it, just based on...
Yeah, but some of us more than others.
Yeah, true.
I mean, look, I think like there are a lot of diehard motor racing fans that were hardcore against it because it went against the traditional rules of an open wheeler. But I think ever since we've seen quite a few scary crashes. I think Alonso had the halo win. Obviously, we had that one at Spa as well. And then
you see the one in F2 yesterday?
There was one in F2. I didn't actually see that, but I saw the replay of that.
The car literally would have wiped
Flew
off
into the halo.
The fella's head.
And we think about like all these crashes in the past, and I'm sure a lot of them, the deaths or serious injuries could have been probably prevented if the halo wasn't implemented earlier. So definitely did its job on the weekend.
The long and short of it is, I want to know, does anyone even see it anymore? Like, I remember by the time we got to the season started, I mean, at preseason testing, it was definitely a thing of controversy. But I think now, like, as weird as it sounds, like, I don't even notice it anymore. Like, it's just part and parcel of the sport.
They've done pretty well with that graphic as well. So it makes it really cool to watch, and you see all the speeds and the gears come up. So they've actually done it pretty good.
The only time you notice it is if you watch old races.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's kind of like we've got to acclimatise to a few uglier things in the halo. If you think about some of the front wings that F1 cars have had over the last 10 years, I think the halo is hardly the ugliest thing. But it really made me
Jaguar, the green one that had the big thing coming off the front.
The Walrus, the Caterham.
Oh, that was a Caterham, wasn't it? Yeah.
Caterham.
We had the Dugong Caterham. We've had the Walrus Williams. We've had everything.
The big nose Aston, didn't they have that big pointy nose on?
The unsymmetrical Lotus.
The Lotus.
The Lotus. That's right.
Yeah.
But it literally made me think, boys, like, if there was a death, like, if there was no halo, that I would be pretty confident in saying that there's serious injury associated with that crash. But if you think about how how stupid or clumsy the accident was, just from someone getting off the line slowly and then kind of getting touched and turning into Zhou, imagine the feeling of a death from something as clumsy as that.
Well, he actually didn't turn into Zhou.
He turned into Gasly.
Gasly was in the middle and he sort of got pincered into Gasly. I mean, at first I thought it was a total Russell fault, but I think it's much more closer to a racing incident, to be honest. Like it was clumsy, but it's like very hard to call it when you're both side by side and there's a guy sort of at your rear wheel.
I mean, I don't know where Russell.
I'm not an F1 driver.
Expected to go.
Yeah,
I'm not an F1 driver. I'm not saying Gasly had to go anywhere. I'm just saying, like, when you look at it from even Gasly's perspective, it's a lot harder to call. I mean, I'm just happy that no one's injured. The funny thing was that Albon and was in an accident that was totally sort of unrelated to it as well. I'm sort of thinking, where the fuck is Albon? Like, he should have got through this. Like, I saw a blue car come through, and then I'm like, he's not coming through. That was
Latifi because he qualified in the top 10, mate.
Yeah,
I'm talking so much crap about Latifi, and he got us a top 10 in the rain.
The crazy thing is, Albon's the one that ended up in hospital, not Zhou.
Yeah.
Like
Sorry, you go. I was just gonna say that impact into the wall, into the pit straight wall, it's a lot harder than what a lot of people would probably assume. Like they're probably doing close to 300 by the time they get to that corner. That's just how quick these F1 cars are.
Yeah,
straight concrete. There was no safety barrier on the pit wall either.
And then he did get hit after he sort of came back into the track twice as well, which would have been.
I'd say that's probably the main cause of like his pain and why he ended up going to the hospital, because like when he has that first initial impact, the belts would soften.
Yeah.
And so that second point of impact would be like completely unexpected and like you say, ragdoll. So lucky they both walked away though, really, because it was quite scary.
I was very scared because I didn't actually show it for a long time, and that's usually a sign of
we think about
caution.
The two biggest crashes in F1 really over the last couple of years was the Grosjean crash and this Zhou crash, and for the biggest injury to be burnt to the hands. And if you look at Grosjean now, there's got no issues at all. Like, it's a testament to the technology in those cars, not just to be fast, but also to be bloody safe, man.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome to see. And then that's not even where it ends, because the race after that, I mean, obviously we had to wait a bit for the race. I fell asleep literally 2 laps in because the red flag killed me. But what a race today. What a race it was to watch. I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, first off, like my boy Perez, like what an absolute legend, you know.
Is Perez your boy? Is that
He's my boy. Okay. I don't know why, but ever since he got into F1, I don't know, maybe the Mexican thing, I don't know, but I've just always loved him and I've always wanted him to do well. And now he's finally in a car that's like, all right, let's see what this guy can really do. And he's doing it.
Can I ask you a question? Because I'm a kind of a Perez fanboy, not so much now that he's at Red Bull, but when he was at Sauber, definitely when he was at McLaren. Do you remember the first race that you kind of took notice of him? And I want to see if it's the same as mine.
It was Malaysia. I think it was 2014 against Alonso. I noticed him before. He was doing pretty good. He was sneaking into the top 5 and that a couple of times. But that was really like his come out party where, you know, everyone kind of took notice of this guy who showed it to a 2-time world champion, you know, and Alonso was in the Ferrari then, so he definitely had the better car. And it's unbelievable.
And like after 2 laps in, I thought he was done. I mean, he kind of probably got a little bit lucky with the safety car, but boys, to see Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull all being able to duke it out and to make passes on each other and to go through corners side by side multiple times. I mean, the pass from Leclerc on the outside of Hamilton, I mean,
there's even a pass when Hamilton went past Leclerc and Perez. I think it was 10 laps to go.
Oh man, that was.
I mean, I don't want to jump the gun and get to the end of the race, but the last 10 laps, I really think was the best 10 laps of Formula One I've ever watched.
I agree.
I've never seen 4 cars racing around the track sort of like they're go-karts, you know what I mean? Like the amount of movement and the ability to follow. It was like every F1 fan's wet dream. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was gonna say it reminded me of a go-kart race.
Yeah,
like these guys are doing 300. These guys are doing 340k an hour at this track, and like some of the corners, they're cornering at 280, 300 k's, and they're doing that side by side for, I'd say, majority of the race. It's just unbelievable. Like these guys are just insane.
You know what's surprising to see?
Get in your shifter, Tristan, and go behind them, mate. You'll be fine.
Well, I don't know about
He
that. I
probably
can't
would've-
last more than 5 laps in that thing.
He probably would have stayed behind him because they were cutting. Like if you saw how quickly Lando and Fernando came to the back of that pack as well. But I
How
mean,
quickly Carlos checked out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But we've spoken a lot in the last couple of podcasts about, changes that could enhance Formula One, and we spoke about kind of going back to tracks where there isn't runoff and that kind of stuff. But the amount of times we saw people outbrake each other or outbrake the car to make a move, but then obviously have to brake harder because there was a grass corner, and he kind of couldn't go over the grass and just get onto some concrete on the other side, essentially. I mean, we saw some really good racing because there was outbraking and then switchbacks and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you were on a track that, wasn't Silverstone, let's say it was Russia, for example, or a track where you've got acres of tarmac beside you, then you don't have that same fear to go over, onto the extremities of the track and across the white line. So I think going back to a more traditional circuit, one that traditionally generates awesome racing anyway, but giving some physical limitations to the track was really awesome to see. And it was, it kind of was the coming out really for this new generation and era or formula that we're seeing now, because if that's the racing that can be generated when the track is good and the cars are close, then it's a winner. It just has to continue.
We mentioned it a couple of weeks ago that what's the point of the virtual safety car, and it doesn't do anything to the spectacle. And then we saw the actual safety car bunch up the pack yesterday, and I think that helped with the last 10 laps. I think we need to get rid of that virtual safety car, because without that, I think we would get more of this kind of close racing.
I think where
these incidents happen,
the virtual safety car would be, I don't know, probably beneficial is a race like what I did in the 6 hour, where you've got 70 cars, and by the time it takes the safety car to go around and then clean that track up, you've lost 5, sometimes 6, 7 laps. And it's like, it's just ridiculous. So in a race like F1, I don't really see the point in it when you've got 20 cars on the grid and, let's say 8 of them are lapped anyway.
Yeah.
You might as well bunch them up or let them go and then let the front runners race on without clear with clear traffic. So
the other thing that you mentioned, which is a good point, is that Formula One is very much sort of like a fast food when it comes to motorsport. Like it's relatively quick in terms of a race, but it has to be full of highlight packages. Whereas an endurance race is totally different because you're sort of racing against the clock as sort of your friend trying to milk it down.
Yeah.
Well, it came into the full course yellow, the virtual safety car came into existence at Le Mans. With
and it works there.
And it works because you've got a massive track. You've got 60, 70 cars that you need to bunch up. It might take 5 or 10 minutes to bunch up, and then it takes a long time for marshals to get out on the track and to do the job. So to just shut down that particular sector of the track to fix it more quickly works there, particularly when you've got a 24-hour race. But in something like Formula One, where realistically, once the field does spread out, you don't have as many incidents, you don't have as, it's not really as engaging at all. They should really be, it's almost like in NASCAR, they do the opposite. Any chance they get to throw the caution, they have cautions now that just like at the end of each sector, it's a caution. But just to bunch the field back up, particularly in Formula One, is I mean, again, it's testament to what we saw today, because 100%. The last 10 laps were phenomenal.
I think as well, what we saw, going back to what you said, Anth, was that like when you come to a track and you think about a lot of the tracks that we've had previously, and I don't want to harp on about Miami and Baku as much as we have, and Saudi Arabia, because we've done a lot of that. But when you look at the kind of track that Silverstone is, a track with a lot of flowy corners, a lot of fast corners, a track also that where tire life actually matters, because you're in so much sort of mid corner, you need so much mid corner sort of lean on the tires. When you've got bad tires, like you saw it with Leclerc, it really spices it up, number one, but also it throws a bit of strategy in there. So I think what we saw, especially yesterday, was, okay, F1, like now the ball's in your court. We've seen the best race this year by far. Like, okay, we understand we have to go to Baku, we have to go to Saudi Arabia, but we've got like tracks like Spa coming up now, sort of very similar track. If we get the same spectacle there, and at the same time people are going, is this track going to be on the calendar next year? That's a really bad look for the sport. It's, and you can imagine that we'll get a similar spectacle there if that comes up and we have the same questions lingering. It's going to be a really bad look.
Mm.
I had an interesting conversation on Saturday. Someone who's new to Formula One got into Formula One purely from Netflix, which is pretty common occurrence these days. And she's from England. And we're kind of talking about Silverstone. Her dad had been to Silverstone, multiple times. And her biggest attraction to going to Silverstone was the whole fact of having to travel there, having to camp there. And she kind of was interested in having like that festival-like atmosphere of spending a weekend away at the track. Now, we've spoken about Formula One taking the track to the people, city centres, tracks, on harbour sides, etc. Very much like what Formula E's model is. But I think, the point could be made, like places like Spa, places like Silverstone, places like Nürburgring, where kind of there has to be some level, like some, I don't know, not a retreat, but it's like some mass movement of people to get to the track and to stay there for the weekend. There's something intangible about it that actually would and does engage fans as well. So I don't know, I think trying to move away from these traditional venues that, while they're harder to get to, number one, the racing at these tracks is phenomenal, and it's been tried and tested for years on end, and that's why the tracks remain relevant, because it's great passing, it's great racing, etc. But I think F1 really needs to consider, number one, they want fans there, but number two, fans will move there if the spectacle is good.
Well, my question is, can you get 150,000 fans like they could yesterday?
They got 400,000 men
over the weekend, but 150,000 people in stadium, like in ground yesterday. Can you get that on a?
Well, they used to get like 200,000 or something. The Gold Coast 600 just here for supercars and
yeah.
Obviously they used to have the Indy there, so that helped. But the only real track in Australia that's capable of doing something like that, Albert Park, unfortunately, or Bathurst.
Bathurst.
Yeah.
But Bathurst is a pilgrimage.
If it were up to me, Nürburgring has to be on there. Nürburgring has to be on the calendar. Spa should be on it. I almost reckon Le Mans should be on it too, because these are some of the most pinnacle racetracks in the world that everyone's grown up hearing about. And then you hear about them going to tracks, that supply no racing. There's no real excitement about going there. Yeah. And it's just like, why are they spending all this money, time, resources going to these tracks that no one really cares about?
The thing as well is most of these tracks are in places that are only famous because of the race.
Yeah.
Like Le Mans is only famous because of a race.
Exactly.
Bathurst is in the middle of
it's in the middle nowhere. Really. It's nothing
like 200,000 people go there every year for the 1,000. It's, at minimum 2.5 hours from some civilization. I think that excuse doesn't really hold water when you think about, the amount of people that are happy to sort of move heaven and earth to get to the races that they want to get to. Sure. The other thing as well that you think about it, of course, you're going to have to take races to people when you're taking 3 races to some countries now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the whole idea of like sort of one GP in every country sort of loses its luster, I suppose, because you've got 3 of them to choose from. So then you have to take it to city centers.
I'm all for the Las Vegas race, by the way, but the Miami race, I don't know about.
Las Vegas track looks simple and like, I don't know. You don't want to say
more
tracks
conducive for passing.
Yeah, because you want, like, I don't know, for overtaking, like we've said it before, but for overtaking to take place, you need to have fast straights, sections where you can go flat out, and then you've got to brake heavily.
Yeah, of course.
And a lot of the new tracks now, they're curvy. If you look at Saudi Arabia, it's literally curve all the way to a hairpin.
Yeah.
Curve all the way back to another hairpin.
It's the same as Baku.
Yeah, it's not a real hairpin.
It's just like, and it's basically the guys who have the fastest car win at that race, and it's boring.
But also, if you look at the spectacle of like the F1 car now going through Maggots and Beckett's, that is something that is so much more like visually appealing and sort of you get a lot more respect for the drivers and just going 350 k's down the runway strip at Baku.
What about the tank slapper that Carlos had going through the S's during this? I mean, that looked pretty
nasty.
Pretty
That would have woken me up.
Yeah,
if I was in the car. Jesus.
Never would have happened 2-3 years ago with the old generation of car. But even something like that, he's in the lead. It looks the car obviously got away from him and he collected it pretty well. But even something like that, it just shows that those sections of the track that we kind of took for granted in the past, they're pretty sketchy now, and that's good to see. And also he got off the track onto the grass, then back onto the tarmac that was 5 meters off or so. Significant disadvantage, and I mean that's awesome to see. Kind of coming back to the race though, boys, a few talking points that we probably should make mention of. Lewis Hamilton
look great.
Back.
Wow.
Mercedes look great.
I think he's got a lot of confidence from the weekend. Well, the last 2 weekends actually. He was he got on the podium at, was it Canada? And then
he was close to a podium.
He got fourth, didn't he?
Fourth.
Yeah. I thought it was fourth. Yeah, fourth at Canada, and then backs it up with a podium this weekend. It's like the guy's definitely still got it. So anyone that's saying that he doesn't, they need to wake up and watch the last 8 years of the sport.
I've been saying it, but I was watching like the car's still obviously.
Must have heard Anthony and Nelson PK this weekend.
Now I know where he gets it from.
He obviously the car's still not at the level of the Ferrari or the Red Bull, but for him to stay in the fight, but even just like to make it a fight. I mean, obviously, I don't know. Some respect has to be given for how committed, how scrappy he was in that race. Because I mean, there's obviously some level of over pushing the car or overachieving with the package that he had to keep it there. Now, obviously, he had a little bit of tire advantage at the end as well that assisted him. But regardless of that, I mean, we saw the same thing.
Also, the
Perez.
upgrades though that we saw.
Yeah, they had a few.
So they brought a massive upgrade package this weekend, and they looked more competitive the whole weekend. Yeah. Like a lot of teams actually looked more competitive. Like the Alpines looked better. I don't know if McLaren brought anything, but they definitely looked better this weekend.
McLaren, yeah.
So is it also the fact that everyone was waiting to bring a massive sort of package, and most teams are very local to Silverstone as it is. But yeah, I thought it was like a lot of the teams really looked good.
One thing that I did notice was that like Mercedes were closer to the front, McLaren were closer to Mercedes, but even Alonso with the Alpine, talk about someone who's overachieving with the car and pushing every like iota out of that product. I mean,
that last
guy's 41. Laps, he's still got it, eh?
That last 10 laps, I thought he'd start overtaking or start getting real close to that group of three. I didn't think Lando would quite get in there, and you could see towards the end he was starting to drop off. But Alonso was right there the whole way. Like, the guy's a gun, mate.
He's like he's a 41-year-old that we need.
He's a generational talent, like, honestly.
Well, he's two generations now.
Exactly.
He's probably a bit of probably one of the worst things of the weekend. What is going on with Ferrari and their strategy calls? Why?
Yeah, well, they could have easily had a 1-2 this weekend. I think.
Like why would they leave Charles out? He had track position as well. I mean,
it was bizarre because even Lewis came over the radio and he said, like, "Are you sure we're on the right tires?" And for anyone that's ever watched the sport, they know how much of a tire advantage you get from getting a brand new pair of soft tires.
10 laps is a long time around Silverstone, especially
particularly at
Silverstone. Sort of corner time.
Yeah,
particularly.
But
at Silverstone.
They got it right in one way. Carlos got his maiden win, which was so cool to see him up on the top step. And I know how hard he's worked to get that. He's been through a few teams, and he's finally got that win, which was awesome.
I ask you guys what you think. Leclerc had obviously front wing damage, but his pace throughout most of the race was on Carlos's, if not a little bit better. Yeah. If they made that strategy call, does Carlos get the win?
I don't know. I don't know.
If conventional wisdom sort of reigned, they would have double stacked.
Yeah,
like it's a 2.5 second lap. You can relatively easily
and they wouldn't have lost much time on the safety car.
They would have just said, you peel back 2.5 seconds, hold up everyone, and then 1, 2, and then you'll be back in accordion order again.
Yeah, but Coulthard could have taught him how to do that easily.
And at the worst comes to the worst, even if they did double stack and Hamilton got either Leclerc or Sainz, it's like they've got the car speed to be able to get past them. Like it shouldn't have been an issue, but I don't know. I honestly think they panicked and they went like, well, let's just maintain our position. Therefore, he has to get past us.
I think it comes back to, we've been mentioning it for the last couple of pods as well, that Ferrari is still in a position where they're not match fit at the front of the field. Like they're able to react to, in the past, been able to react to teams in front of them and what they do, but they still getting kind of finding their feet in relation to being the instigator of the strategy and everybody else following them. And they're making some mistakes. It'll probably take them the whole year to figure it out. And I think that's just purely based on match fitness or, the lack of experience in recent history being at the front of the field. But it could bite them in the ass because they could have had a much bigger points haul for the Constructors' Championship than they did, particularly when Verstappen had such an ordinary race.
That's why Leclerc was so annoyed, because he could have made ground on Verstappen or more.
Yeah, but I'm not too worried about how Leclerc feels. I'm really happy for Carlos, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too.
He deserves a win. He qualified well.
He drove well.
He did. He's been unlucky to start the year.
Yeah. I know he's not the fastest driver out there, but man, he works hard to get that win. And I know how much that would have meant to him. So it's pretty cool.
It's actually a very ballsy overtake as well to sort of get ahead of Charles, because Charles ran a bit wide, but to get that close to your teammate, I mean, we saw what happened with the AlphaTauri hillbillies a couple laps before. So it can end in disaster.
Did any of you watch the IndyCar? Did you see?
How many incidents
the Andretti boys had this weekend?
Grosjean was involved in a couple. Grosjean and Rossi.
Rossi did Grosjean, then Grosjean thought, you know what, I'm going to do Herta the same way I got done by Rossi.
Grosjean things, I love it.
Jeez. I didn't actually see the IndyCar, but I'm pretty sure I saw that Scott McLaughlin, did he get a win?
Mate, got a dub.
He got a win.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. And Hunter in the Indy Lights got a win as well. So
that's right.
And Lockie Hughes in
Lockie Hughes
S2000.
Is that the S2000 or the American
SF2000
version of the F4 or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Yep. Mate, I know Lockie pretty well. He's a legend. I'm so happy for him. He and Hunter I used to race with, and they're just such good kids.
Aussie dominance in America this week.
Yeah, and in the F2, Jack Doohan got his maiden win.
Going up.
Good weekend in general for us Aussies and Kiwis.
I think it's time for one of them to replace DR. Let's move there.
I was gonna say how long to either Anthony calls for DR's extinction, or how long till Anthony turns on these young Aussie guys when they don't perform to his liking.
I just feel so bad for Daniel Ricciardo, but
how are you feeling about him, Tristan? Like you're a new voice to this conversation. I want to hear your honest.
Man, I absolutely love Daniel Ricciardo. I think he is an absolute legend. I think he's one of the most talented guys on the grid. But right now,
his smile isn't cutting it anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just not performing. And I know that car must be a dog to drive.
Not for Lando though.
Well, I mean, he's still not. He's still not lighting it up like they were last year. You had Lando Norris contesting for podiums just about every race last year, whereas now he's can't even get in a slipstream.
You know what happened this week, Harry? That has hurt me the most about my DR defending. He couldn't get past Latifi there.
Oh, look, in all honesty, I'd love to see Oscar Piastri get an F1 seat. Whether it takes over DR, I don't know, but
I think he'll be going to Williams. But the qualifying, I watched qualifying. Like it's so weird. Like I come on the pod.
Qualifying was different.
Just listen.
Qualifying.
Just listen. I come on the pod and I berate the guy. Probably because I had such high expectations for him when he came to McLaren. I would berate him, and then I go to qualifying, and I'm like, "Come on, dude, just give me something to like." Hold my hat on, just to hold on to, exactly, because I'm like, I want you to do well. He's such a likable person. But listen, it wasn't a whole lot. Anyway, so then in qualifying, it's wet. I'm like, this will be perfect for him. Struggles really to get out of Q3 because it was in 17th until his last run got him into 14th. And then we can talk about how they didn't give him a banker lap or whatever it might be like that. But come on, man, like. For Lando to finish 6th and for him to finish 14th, and to be 2.1 seconds out of the cutoff zone of the top 10, That's hard to swallow, and it's hard to defend objectively.
It is.
It is a hard.
But you know what I don't
number to
understand,
defend.
Anthony. You should understand Daniel Ricciardo's plight more than
Why?
anyone, because he's finishing whereabouts you finish your go-kart races at the moment.
I don't get paid $20 million to
That's
do
true.
it though, and I don't claim to be like the greatest.
And this
Like
weekend,
he's supposed to be a killer.
Yeah. The thing about like Daniel is, I get how it must feel for him. He comes into this team. Everyone's got such high expectations for him. They think that he's probably going to be their next world champion. But you've also got to think there's this young kid called Lando Norris in there that is obviously just, obsessed with Zach Brown, and Zach Brown's obsessed with him. And Zach Brown thinks that this kid's the future of McLaren. And so they built the car around Lando for the last 3 years. And Daniel Ricciardo has to jump into that car, And he's gone from a championship winning car in Red Bull to a pretty much a shit box in the Renault. And then so, his expectation is up here because that's what he was used to at Red Bull. Whereas Lando Norris didn't have any expectations coming into F1. He drove that McLaren, which was a dog at the start. Now he's driving a half decent car that's, capable of finishing 6th, 5th, 4th, wherever. And it's like Daniel's used to being in a race winning car. Same thing that's happening to Hamilton.
Do you think
and Vettel?
Well, yeah, and Vettel.
Yeah,
of course.
but do you think? Okay, here's another question then about the DR scenario. So obviously we know. I mean, it's become more obvious over the last couple of years that DR has interests and passion projects outside of racing now. It's almost like when people come into F1, it's like laser focused, obviously, because they're trying to make something of themselves, and then they get established and they can start thinking about other things. Now, obviously, we know he likes his music. We've seen his YouTube channels, and he rides dirt bikes. He goes and hangs out with Jack Miller, all this kind of stuff. And there was talk.
What a mad lad Jack Miller is.
Yeah, he's pretty cool, actually.
Don't get him started on that.
His YouTube videos are making me like him more, like the YouTube videos of him just being a larrikin. But
can I say
when he falls off the bike, I'm like,
F, don't get into your Aussie hate, man.
But
you
listen,
would think that we were like
let me finish
a Brazilian
my question.
podcast or something. The amount of hate that we're giving our Aussies.
Let me finish my question. Let me let me finish my question. There was talk this week about him having a new reality TV show. I think it was on Hulu, maybe Netflix, but they were going to follow him around for a year and, broadcast it, record it, etc. If I'm Daniel Ricciardo and I'm struggling, I don't know if I say yes to that. And if I do say yes to it, is it almost like I'm on my way out anyway? This is something that I can do to, prolong my relevance or longevity as, to make some kind of money. I don't know. Do you reckon it was a smart move on his part?
I think in his head, this isn't going to last. I think he himself knows he's going to turn it around eventually. Whether it's at McLaren or somewhere else, I don't know. But yeah,
do you really think it's going to turn around? But honestly,
if Daniel Ricciardo had a car underneath him that number one could do what he wants a car to do the most, which is take lunges, because he loves a car that's stable under lunges. Like the fact that we haven't seen a DR lunge for years. Sort of is testament to the fact that the cars he's driven since then obviously don't suit the attacking style that he has.
Yeah.
Whether you want to agree or not agree, but you want to argue the point that as a driver you need to be adaptive and sort of get the most out of what's underneath you. That's a fair enough point. Well, but the fact that we haven't seen those moves, sort of, and we saw how many of them, like every race would see one or two for the longest time. I think that in itself could be one of the problems. I mean, the other thing is that he's getting a bit older, and I mean, more often than not, you do get to an age where, I'm not saying you're not as sharp, but the younger fellas always seem to. Especially now, they sort of seem to just be a little bit more daring, a little bit more ballsy, and I don't know. And then they've learnt from the guys who have sort of been leading the sport for so long, and they just seem to be just a little bit sort of harder to catch. And there's a lot of them at the moment. But the thing is, though, if DR had stayed at Renault, I think, or Alpine, he would be in a different spot than he is now, because I think the Alpine, in some ways, is car that is not temperamental like the McLaren and seems to be able to attack cars a little bit more. And it's all sort of ifs and buts.
Can I throw another question to you then? So we saw the best of DR obviously in Red Bull when Red Bull wasn't the best team, but he was able to maximize the most from that car. Now, I'm going to use Alonso as an example. I think the last 10 years of Alonso, when he hasn't been in the best team, whether it was at Ferrari, where he managed to somehow get that car to the final race of the season with a sniff for the championship multiple times, or whether he was at McLaren, where the car was an absolute dog, and at places like Baku, with 40% of his floor left, he was able to score a points finish, or even at at Alpine now. I mean, I wouldn't say he's dominating, but he's still much.
There was a time at McLaren where Alonso at McLaren still looked shit when the car was an F2 car.
But if you gave him, but we always saw glimpses of if there was a chance for him to try something or to have half of the lap of scrapping, you would still see Alonso, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's that Kimi Räikkönen, like, even Valtteri Bottas, Lewis Hamilton style of driving, where it's just like this old school, just like dogfight almost.
Yeah.
And I really like that about Alonso. I see that in Hamilton, and I think that, like, you're talking about these old guys, Vettel's got it as well. When Vettel gets the chance to show his racing craft against some of these younger kids, he shows them up because, you're talking about some of the best drivers that have ever been in the sport of F1.
But
especially, well, I'd say DR's got to be up there, but the guy's never won anything. So, he's never won a championship. He's never led a team to a championship victory. So, there's a lot of negatives going against Daniel Ricciardo, which is
he's never even won a team's championship, which is
no. Well, the Ferrari won it that year. Oh no, who won it? Yeah, Mercedes won it that year. That's right. I don't know why.
Red Bull was probably the third best car on the grid when he was with them. So,
and well, they had a real good chance of winning it that year, but it just, I think
the Red Bull was never as bad as
Red Bull
favored now.
Yeah, Red Bull favored Max, and at the time, Daniel was probably their best driver. So.
It didn't help he had like 6 bloody engine blow-ups.
Yeah, I know. And then it all started at bloody Melbourne when he had that he finished third and he got that fuel sample issue.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, true. Do you know what really happened? His speed left him when he started painting clouds on his helmet.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
What happened.
If I could get away with wacky helmet designs, I would.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, don't start this can of worms, Tristan. Please, man. Let's please.
What's our next? Oh, what was our next? We had another good talking point for this pod that has eluding me right now. What was it, boys? We bookmarked it halfway through in the week. Yeah, F1.
Oh yeah, Nelson Piquet.
No. We're not going there. We're not going there. No. Midweek.
The
Russell.
Yeah,
the bitching.
Oh yes. The
bitching.
George Russell.
So, yeah. Do you want to lead? You can lead with this show.
Yeah, I don't want to be as negative as you've been over the last 10 minutes, but I do think that the argument that George Russell presented about a fan booing him on the parade lap was
weak.
Was very piss poor. And I was thinking, if you're a football player at any rivalry game, you're getting booed by 40,000 fans at least half the games of your season. So let's say that's 19 weekends a year, right? Okay, one fan you saw one fan booing you on a parade lap. Don't you want the fans to number one, have someone they're following, so have a bit of passion for another team, even if it's not your team, but you'd rather them have passion in the negative way towards you than sort of all be sort of lukewarm, and apathetic.
Most of the time. You go, Harry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, bring back the old school F1 driver. That's all I want.
Yeah, I agree.
I just don't know. I don't know.
Where's James Hunt? No, I think, like, in terms of that booing thing, like back to something like Kobe Bryant would say, if they boo me, I know that I've gotten to them.
Yeah.
And like, I grew up playing a lot of sports, so I had people trash talk and whatever, right? But it just motivates you more to want to prove them wrong. It can be sort of like 50-50 where they go too far.
There's a line. There's always a line.
I know a couple of the drivers who have had a lot of issues with social hate in the past, where, you know, online people feel like, well, even in person, sometimes feel like they can say whatever the hell they want to people because they're celebrities or they're famous or they race or they're, you know, an athlete. And sometimes it crosses a line. Like I know people that have got death threats and et cetera, et cetera. Bullying's not an issue. If you're just bullying, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But
Mostert posts about it a fair bit, doesn't he?
What's that? Sorry?
Yeah.
Chaz,
yeah.
Yeah, well, he's one of the guys I'm talking about. I know that he had a real tough time, particularly after the 12-hour one year when he was involved in that incident. And
when he binned the BMW, was that the one?
Yeah. Okay. And look, it happened to a lot of other drivers as well. You know, people just go a little bit too far when it comes to, I guess, trash talking online. It gets a bit personal. And that's where it crosses the line. It's not acceptable. But like I say, you know, I'm all for a bit of sports camaraderie where, you know, you've got your one team and that's it. You know, like for example, you're a one-eyed Holden fan. You know, that's it. You don't see blue, you see red, or vice versa. And I'm all for that. And it's great for the sport, and it's great for F1 to have, oh, I'm Red Bull. You know, I hate Mercedes, or I'm Mercedes and whatever. But it's like I say, it's got to come with a fine line. You can't cross it.
There's a really good sort of juxtaposition for this problem a couple of weeks ago in supercars when what's his name? The guy who makes the calls now. Is it
who makes
Baird? Craig Baird. Baird was getting some real bad.
He got death threats.
Death threats. I think it was for the Cam Waters incident.
Yeah, Cam Waters and Gizzy.
And
Will Davidson, I think.
Yeah, Will Davidson. He got some ridiculous like death threats for that call. And I mean,
when you say call, what do you mean? Like, is he
the
race
the
control
call
or something? Or?
Yeah, so they penalized
Cam Davidson.
Cam Warren on for was overtaking off the track or something like that. I think it was. So like that is a perfect example of when fans have gone too far,
100%.
and there has to be a sort of a reining in, and there has to definitely be sort of like a precedent set. And that's a good. It's a very extreme example, but it's a good example. And then this week we have
that's what they deal with, though. That's just what they deal with, and that's what, like I say, behind the scenes, a lot of these drivers are just trying to go about their day-to-day lives. You know, they're entertaining us on the track, but away from it, they're just regular human beings.
You reckon Tim Edwards needs to shut down those burner accounts, because it was probably him that was giving
I don't know.
After
I don't know.
But like even like you have the whole Hamilton, like I'm gonna mention it, the whole Hamilton and PK thing this week. That whatever you think of it, and I don't know enough about it to have a strong opinion on anything, because I can't speak Brazilian, and I don't know what he really said, because I don't understand it properly. But you can look at it however you want, and if he shouldn't have said what he said 100%. But this is a serious situation for the sport. Right. And then on the same day, we've got George Russell saying, I got booed by some fans in the crowd.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, how you felt like that. But that doesn't correlate to what, you know, the story of the day is at all. So maybe just take a little bit of, I don't know what the word is, just think about it before you say it, because it sounded so bitch. Like it really did. It sounded so bitch. And I was like, come on, like, we love you, man. We love you.
Yeah.
Just don't fall into these games.
I think it's a bit maybe it's a cultural thing as well, and like we're talking like we're old men, but we're not even 30 yet. Most of us aren't anyway. But you mean F1 traditionally was like a championship where you had to give everything you had to intimidate. So you know, you had drivers like Schumacher, Hakkinen, even people like Coulthard, Villeneuve, where any sign of weakness, you know, they wouldn't show it. Whereas you've got, I think, a generation of drivers now. I mean, Lando, Albon, Russell, great drivers, all quick, but they're a little bit more, they're probably a little bit more honest.
But definitely young as well.
Yeah, they're younger, but they're a bit more honest. And I don't think they have the same, they probably don't have the same need to try to keep everything that is kind of motivating them or attacking them kind of to themselves, and they just kind of let it out. But yeah, it's interesting. I just think we'll take a little bit of getting used to, but I don't think it's going to change with the way that Gen Z is.
I'm happy. I'm happy with booze. If booze stay, it's fine.
Booze are fine.
Like if we stay at booze, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
You know, as long as it doesn't cross the line past that, I'm happy to see people, number one, have teams that they follow, fans that I can also then hate.
Bit of tribalism.
Because it's not my team, you know, a bit of tribalism. You know, but as long as we keep it there, and that's all, I think that's well and good. Like that's a good place for us to keep it.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else on the F1 front that caught your eye, tickled your pickle?
One thing, while we were bagging out Russell, I did also really enjoy seeing his sportsmanship on the weekend. I personally don't really think he deserved that penalty, but I also understand that rules are rules, and he did get out of his car, blah, blah, blah. But the main thing I got from that was like just...
No, good on him. He ran. He ran.
Yeah,
like it was like literally...
He looked like David Hasselhoff running through that sand.
You know what else was really interesting? I mean, during the race, they kind of interviewed him mid-race, and you could obviously tell he was disappointed. You could obviously tell that, like he made it clear of what he did and why he did it. But at the same time, when he was questioned about it, like he didn't want to make the issue about him. And I think, to be honest with you, I think a lot of drivers this weekend, I mean, there was a few drivers that had pretty ordinary races. Bottas had an ordinary race. And the first thing they were all saying was like, you know, regardless of the situation that happened with my race, you know, everybody has to come away from this race just being very grateful with, number one, the fact that no drivers were injured. And number two, that they were walking away healthy for the most part. And I think as a collective, Formula One, the drivers, all displayed some level of you know, genuine sportsmanship.
100%.
Which is awesome to see. I mean, obviously last year at Silverstone we had the whole, you can call it a controversy about Verstappen going to hospital and not many people worrying about it. But to see, you know, particularly the gravity of this situation and for the drivers to react the way they did, it also normalizes them. It kind of shows that they're human still and that it affects all of them.
100%.
That was, you know, really pleasing to see. And I think it sends a good message. I mean, we're talking about booing on all this kind of crap, but when you've got all the drivers kind of saying the same thing and kind of making the audience realize that at the end of the day, racing is not the most important thing. It's the safety of the drivers, and everyone can go home after their day of fun. Was really, really powerful to see. Really good.
Isn't it a testament to the sport that it's the fastest it's ever been and also the safest it's ever been? Like at the same time, like that is like in terms of any other sort of sport activity or anything, that's the biggest juxtaposition, but it's so true. And it's the one thing that you can sort of rest your head on, that these F1 teams is putting a lot of money into R&D, but as a sport, like there was I think it's what's his name, Craig Scarborough. He had a good sort of little tech talk this weekend. I think it was before actually the crash, about the safety in sort of inventions that have gone into these F1 cars and the safety of that monocoque chassis for the driver. And sort of he went through the front, rear, and side sort of crush structures on the car, and then to sort of see that, and then see a couple hours later something that terrifying, and for the driver to be walking through the paddock by the time the race was still going, you know, that's a testament to at least, if one thing, the FIA is dedicated to the safety of its drivers, which it needs to be.
100%. And like I'm probably a little bit sick-minded being a race car driver and looking up on YouTube some of these biggest crashes of all times, but I'm sure we've all done it, you know. But you know, I've seen all the big crashes. There was Robert Kubica's at Canada, that was just sickening, and you know, obviously Senna's and that. And you look at the course of history, and it's like some of these crashes that we've witnessed in probably the last five years, we probably think about the season and think, oh, there hasn't really been that many big crashes. But if you look back on it, like
Verstappen's crash last year was really bad.
Verstappen's was huge. And even at Monza, where Verstappen ended up on top of Hamilton, like, man, that could have gone so south as well. You had a crash at Monza. I can't remember if it was an Alfa Romeo back then or the Sauber or whatever it was, but that had a huge crash in the front straight.
It was a Sauber.
Was it a Sauber? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was a Sauber, yeah.
You obviously had Grosjean's last year, and you know, you think back.
What was
We
it,
had
Bianchi 10 years ago?
Yeah, well,
That
that's what I was
the-
going to say. Bianchi and that Marussia, Marussia. Yeah,
Mm.
if he had have had that halo, he'd be here.
Yeah.
And so it's a big testament to the sport, the safety, the advances in technology, and like you say, the race and data side of things is one thing, but the safety is the priority in that sport. And
Well, do you know what's crazy? Like thinking back to some of the big crashes. Now you can look back from the 90s, 80s, and you'd see all kinds of huge crashes where people were burnt, people were killed, etc. But if you look more recently, even like early 2000s to Schumacher's crash at Silverstone where he broke his legs,
yeah,
right? If you look at that crash in juxtaposition to some of the crashes that we've seen today, if they had the technology that we have now, even then in the early 2000s, he doesn't miss that
didn't really
season.
look that bad.
It didn't look dramatic. That's what I mean. The point I'm
Yeah.
trying to make is it didn't look dramatic really at all, but it just goes to show how much stronger the cars have got. Even like Michael Schumacher is still like a pretty recent history for Formula One, but the technology from then to now has dramatically changed so much
Even
just from those 15 years.
Even, I mean, open wheel is one thing. Obviously, you got like Indy cars and that are adopting the same sort of safety levels and safety cells and that. But even for myself, just in a production car, a BMW, or even the supercars, you feel pretty safe strapping in. You don't feel like you're really, throwing a Hail Mary and you're wishing your life away. You actually genuinely do feel pretty safe. Obviously, it's at the back of your mind that something could happen, something could go wrong, because it's motorsport, and that's why we love it. But
For the most part, you can
for the
go
most
in-
part, 100%, yeah, you feel pretty safe strapping in. And even like you guys do go-karting. I've done go-karting since I was 7. I've seen some horrific crashes, and I think the worst I've ever seen, or the worst injury, was like a broken collarbone or something, so it goes to show that even in grassroots category, they're taking a lot of I guess pride and effort into their safety mechanisms that keep drivers safe.
Well, I had a guy in February who came over the top of me, broke my ribs, but broke his back.
Oh,
and that was huge.
Yeah.
And then he was racing again this weekend. When I went
Yeah, true.
racing, and I'm like, bloody hell! Like, number one, kudos to you for strapping back in, but also, I mean, he was wearing like one of the what are they
little
called?
hands device things.
Yeah,
The motorbike ones, the round
like
ones.
like a neck brace, that they put underneath the helmet.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much that helped him, but probably did something. But he was back racing this week. So that was awesome to see as well.
Yeah.
Boys, before we finish up, a few things that I did want to talk about. Number one, I wanted to give you at the end, Tristan, a chance to tell us what's happening in your motorsport journey. But before we do that, just very quickly on IndyCar, racing at Mid-Ohio this morning.
Great track.
Great track, historic track for IndyCar. Bumpy, multiple surfaces, grass on the outside of every ripple strip, which was awesome to see.
So
And once again, we just saw an awesome exploit of racing. H, what did you take away from the race, and what are your thoughts on the event?
Scott McLaughlin, mate, it was like he was back at Supercars, just led the race pretty much for the whole thing, and didn't look like the only Palou towards the end was kind of catching him, but
he looked pretty cozy up front, to be honest with you.
And they even said it on the commentary, even when he was in Supercars, he was best when he was up front, and he was just leading that race. Will Power, wow.
Mate,
first lap he was last, and then ends up on the podium, like amazing.
He was carving his way through the field like he was on push to pass for the whole race.
He showed a lot of willpower this weekend, I think.
I don't know if he's ever heard that one.
I don't think. First time exclusive.
Nah. Australians dominated in IndyCar, like the whole spectacle this weekend. Like, yeah.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Scotty McLaughlin's a New Zealander.
Yeah, Kiwi.
Oh.
I'm sure there's been
Same
a lot of
thing.
Aussies that have tried to claim him, though.
Yeah. But if that happens in Formula One, there's extenuating circumstances that have caused someone going from the back of the grid to being on the podium. He literally passed every car on the way through.
Yeah.
Like, it was amazing.
It was
I think that's what we always talk about
awesome
with
race.
about what the sport is like. It's so raw, but also the cars are so close that you can actually have these moments where your skill as a driver come to the fore. come to the fore. I.e., let's get Danny Rick in IndyCar next year and remind everyone how good he is.
Yeah.
But like
McLaren.
Whether they still want him.
I don't know if it were McLaren, I'd send him somewhere else. But as a sport, like that's what the probably what the biggest draw to IndyCar is that you've got so many good, talented drivers in there, and the only excuse now, because there's so many good teams now, is like how good are you on any given week? I mean, and yeah, of course, when you start at the front, like Scotty McLaughlin did this weekend, it's always a lot easier. But I think, like, even if you look at the amount of different race winners we've had this year, and even like who looks good on any given weekend, like it's always changing. And that's because there's so many, like I would say there's at least 14 cars in that grid that could definitely win any weekend. But yeah, like when you've got the Andretti boys sabotaging each other's races.
I love that. I love that Grosjean was involved too. It just made me.
You'd never see that in another sport.
He was a knucklehead. He was an absolute knucklehead this weekend. Like
Grosjean?
I was so excited. I was so excited for him to come to Andretti because I thought after his rookie season he was pretty good, but he's done some boneheaded things this year, man.
I wish I saw it. Now I have to go watch it.
You need, go watch the mini because the race was like the Andretti drivers themselves. I mean, Grosjean took out took out Rossi. He then took out
Rossi and him was a bit of both. Like neither of them wanted to sort of concede. But the Herder one I thought was really dumb.
And
he was so far back.
Did you see Rossi on Di Francesco at the end?
Yeah.
No.
He just took him off the track as well. Like there was just absolute meatheads. But at the same time,
Rossi's leaving it there, did he, mate? What does he care? He's just doing what he wants to do.
I think he's at the point where he's like, stuff you. I'm just going to try to get as many points as I can for my championship. But
all I know is Tristan, get on it, mate. You'll love it.
Yeah, I'm going to actually. That might be what I do after this. Just go and knuckle down and bunker up and watch the IndyCar.
I felt sorry for Pato, to be honest, though, because Pato was looking really good. Was quick. Obviously, got the pole.
Even Rosenquist was looking awesome too.
Yeah. McLaren, the Ferrari of IndyCar.
Well, the beautiful thing that we've seen over the last 3 weeks in IndyCar now is the championship kind of was looking like it was getting a little bit spread. Yeah. And the last 3 races, we've seen McLaughlin win. We've seen the Andretti guys have 2 good races in a row. And while Ericsson has had strong finishes since the Indy 500, he hasn't been dominant. So the battle at the front of the championship is actually squeezed up again. And you've got someone like Palou who had a number of DNFs to start the year, and everyone was saying, he's kind of out of the running to back up his championship from last year. All of a sudden, he's only 39 points off the lead. And I'm thinking if you were to look at the championship standings, I couldn't tell off the top of my head. You'd probably find the top 10 within, I want to say 100 points.
And the last race is a double points race, which always closes it up even more.
So yeah, it's turning out to be an awesome season once again, and it comes back to the ingredients for great racing: old tracks, well, not old tracks, but tracks that are a little bit rough around the edges, challenging cars, equal performance from all the cars, etc.
Will Power, just quickly. Will Power's 20 points behind Ericsson at the moment.
Yeah, and he's had 2 shockers. Well, he didn't have a shocker this week, but he's coming from, Anyway.
I've got something to touch on, actually, for this week, quickly. Yeah. Aaron Seaton.
Bathurst
in Bathurst 1000. We've been saying we'd love to see some guys from these other, sort of championships get a go. We were talking about Joey Mawson last week after winning the S5000, but sort of seeing Seaton there with, he does have the relationship with MSR through Super 2, but how good is that? Like that actually brought a genuine smile.
Aaron's a good mate of mine. He's probably the single most hardworking guy off the grid to do anything motorsport wise. Like he just lives and breathes it. He's got a gym set up in his house, which is actually like most people's bar.
Really?
Seriously. And like I say, he just wakes up, thinks about how he can be successful in motorsport. And like I say, there's probably not too many people that are more deserving of a supercar seat or even a supercars co-drive at Bathurst than him, and I seriously think he'll show everyone what he's made of this year. I hope he does, because he's a really talented driver too.
To think that only a year ago he left TA2 halfway through the season to pursue
Super
that
twos.
move into Super 2s. Now his Super 2 journey hasn't been, straight up. There's obviously been learning along the way, but you can see there are obvious races where his talent has shone through. But also, to see the progression from TA2 through to a supercars, enduro gig in such a short time. Number one, it's awesome because it shows that some of those smaller categories in Australian motorsport do, number one, develop drivers really well. They do provide a stepping stone to get into the main game. But also, like you're saying, I don't understand at your level how hard he's working. But just from a practicality point of view and a financial point of view, the move from TA2 to Super 2 isn't easy. We've spoken to some people about that as well. So for that to take place, there's got to be some level of elbow grease that's being used. So it's just really great to see, and it's awesome
100%.
to have. It's awesome to have the name back in Super.
100%. We've also got a couple of other young kids coming through that are starting to do some really cool things in Australian motorsport. Like we touched on this last time we spoke. We've got Nash Morris, who's racing just about everything. I think he raced HQs last weekend. I'm pretty sure he won. He's raced XLs. He's raced TA2. I think he's still racing TA2. He's racing Super 2. He's the ex Super 3 champion. Like, he's got a big future in the sport. We've also got Jet Johnson, who's competing in the National Trans Am and the state rounds as well. And he had his first supercars test drive the other weekend. I'm not sure if you guys saw with the Johnsons.
The three Johnsons.
You got some really cool names that are starting to come in the sport, and it's like, it's really cool to have been a part of their journey because, like I said, I know Aaron quite well. I grew up racing against him in karts. Obviously, my dad used to race supercars against his old man, same as Steve Johnson and Paul Morris. And, it's just really cool to see all these names back in a sport where they all belong,
It's awesome. And, the interesting thing is, they're huge names, and you'd understand this too. They're huge names historically in Australian motorsport, but not one of them has had an easy path to get to where they want to go. 100%. I mean, even for someone like Nash, obviously, Paul Morris, I don't know him at all, but I always hear him say, and he used to say it with Brock Feeney a lot, put them in any car, any weekend, just to get their miles up. Doesn't matter 100%. If it's an XL, doesn't matter if it's, Trans Am, doesn't matter what it is, but just get them racing. And you're seeing a lot of these young drivers, racing a diverse spectrum of cars just to keep developing themselves. And I think we're kind of seeing that now. The
whole Norwell camp, Paul Morris's, I guess, proteges, that all started with Anton De Pasquale back in the day, but it's sort of changed the game and lifted the level of Australian motorsport, especially grassroots. It's the driver training that you get from going to a place or a facility like Norwell. It brings young drivers up to speed, maybe drivers that haven't really experienced much, let's say karting or open wheeler or whatever it might be, entry route into motorsport. But their driver coaching facilities, and I used to do it, bring you up to speed real quick. And like you say, you got guys like Nash Morris, Brock Feeney, Anton De Pasquale, Brody Kostecki, I could go on and on, Will Brown. These guys are in lawnmowers racing around because they can. And it's like that any chance they get. Shane Van Gisbergen is probably the best example. He had a rally win on the weekend. The guy can just jump in at anything and win. Well, and that's the progression that I guess a driving school like Norwell, does. And I think Paul's very, very much the head of the helm for that. And he should take a lot of the credit for some of these guys' success in their career.
Well, to see how quickly, obviously Brock is really young. He's already in the main game. And probably the biggest thing, or the biggest question going into it was he going to be able to cut the mustard mentally in that particular championship? And I mean, obviously he's young and everything, but he's well prepared. It's been a rookie season in every sense of the word, but he's had some really good performances. He's had some growing pains, but just from a mentality point of view, from a getting his elbows out point of view, he's more than capable and was more than ready to move into them. I think we actually saw it last year at Bathurst.
100%. He got 7th at Bathurst last year.
Yeah, but he crashed out at the end. But
that's right.
But up till the end, like he was in the top 10 for the majority of the second half of the race, and he was, a boy amongst men.
Everyone thought that he wouldn't be able to swim, but I'll tell you what, he's certainly cutting it with these. He's cutting it with some of these big names in the sport, and he's certainly not afraid to get his elbows out. And I seriously think he's in for a really good and long career, and he'll become a household name like Shane Van Gisbergen, Craig Lowndes, Will Davidson, all these guys that have gone on to do great things in our sport, and Brock Feeney will be right up there with all of them.
He's probably young enough to move on as well.
Considering his teammate, he's done quite well.
100%. 100%.
Well, what about you, Tristan? What's your racing?
At the moment, we're on a bit of a hiatus since Bathurst. We had a couple of things happen behind the scenes as a result, but we're just sort of doing our thing at the moment. I'm working full time, so I'm sort of pretty busy with that anyway. But we're also looking forward to the 2023 season. Not too sure what might happen, so it's pretty exciting. Kind of like entering the unknown. For once, it's kind of exciting. Having a bit of time off as well from the sport, which is good. But I've been back karting. I love racing. I can't sit on the couch, So I've been back, getting thrashed around in the KZ and trying to hang on for more than 5 laps. But honestly, it's a challenge. it's so hard, but I just love it.
Watching how violent those things are, man.
I don't know what I was thinking. Honestly,
you've got to have balls, but you've got to have some meat to you as well. Because again, after 5 laps, you look like a rag doll. You can see their heads, by the end of the race. It's like, bloody hell. That's awesome to hear, man.
Well, if you ever want to watch the comedy, come out to Ipswich Kart Club one weekend when I'm racing, and just try and see me try and hang on for more than 5 laps.
I don't know if they'll let you I don't think you can put a bloody GoPro on your helmet in go-karting, but
I could probably try and just I'll send you guys the
I'd
raw
love to see
footage
how
of me just going through trying to hang on and try and pluck gears at the same time.
You just need to come down to Sydney for a weekend race with Anth, and just
if you're talking about Eastern Creek, I don't think I'll ever go there again. Last time I raced there, I cracked 2 ribs.
Mentally scarred.
I'm more than mentally scarred.
You won't have to go that fast to beat Anth, mate. It's fine. You just need to come get some, just boost up your ego a little bit, mate.
Well, I have said that because we're not doing a lot of car racing, I'd like to get fit enough to be able to, make more than like the 10 laps in the final at Ipswich, and then start to get kart fit for maybe something like Pro Tour, or I don't know, I'd have to lose a lot of weight to consider doing Pro Gearbox, but I would love to get back into it. It'd just be so much fun.
That'd be awesome.
Even like you guys say, come to Eastern Creek or something for a weekend, and
I'll have to meet you halfway. Port Macquarie, maybe.
Port Macquarie, done.
Or Coffs Harbour.
Coffs Harbour, that's a great track.
I've got to get a gearbox engine there now.
Oh God! I'll let you have mine. How's that? And I'll spanner it. You might drive it better.
He's got to figure out his baby as well coming soon. That's the other thing.
Well, when do we get him in a cart and get him over the worlds?
Not too long, mate. Not too long.
That was probably the coolest thing going over to Spain, watching Dad race at the World Championships, was seeing all those little 6-7-year-old kids racing around the World Championships. It was like the coolest thing ever. I'm like, one day I'm gonna have a kid and he's gonna be in the World Championships. Just so I get a holiday.
Start saving your pennies now.
Saving them
now. Boys, what an awesome pod tonight, Tristan. Thanks so much for jumping on. You're more than welcome to jump on whenever you want. Maybe you might fall in love with IndyCar and become the Racing Line IndyCar correspondent. We're always happy to have correspondents on, but thanks so much for your time, buddy. It's been awesome.
Thanks so much for having me. Honestly, anytime I get the chance to talk about motorsport, it's a great day. So I love it. I love sharing my journey, my experience, and my knowledge about the sport. And I'm just a motoring enthusiast, just like you guys. It's awesome.
It's the people we love, buddy. Harry, Joe,
thanks,
legends
mate.
As always.
Cheers.
Thanks, boys.
Thank you, boys. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Thanks,
mate. Have a great night, and please like and subscribe on whatever podcast app you're using. Any content that gets thrown out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, any likes and subscriptions would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.